It's thinking. All right. All right, so this is Open Hack Night. So welcome everyone. Thank you very much for coming and braving and dealing with the technical issues of doing this entirely virtually. I really appreciate everyone's patience and appreciate everybody logging on. So first, well, I think the first point, I copied this from last meeting, and I feel like we're all pretty familiar with why we're virtual today. So we'll skip that part. But if you could, we'll go around, tell us your name, how you found us, and what you're interested in. And let's see, I have a cool view where I can kind of see everybody. I'll kick it off though. My name is Ryan Gates. I work at Ultimate Software as a site reliability engineer. I found this group on Meetup, like many of you, I'm sure. Met Rob, and it was really a great opportunity to help the community and use some of the skills that I had, both that I had and a great way to learn new skills and meet some incredible people. So that's really been the highlight for me, even beyond technical, was getting to meet everyone and meeting a lot of different people. So if we could go around, Cindy, do you want to go first? You're on mute right now. You'll have to unmute. I don't know if you're talking.
I'll jump in just for the time being. Rob here. We can popcorn after this. Ryan, co-lead Code for Fort Lauderdale, trying to find ways to use technology to better inform and engage the public. Excited for you all to join today. And yeah, looking forward to the conversation with our special guest. Yelka, you want to go next, or if Cindy's mic is on, go for it.
Hi, I'm Yelka Mikolji. I found this group on Meetup years ago, and I'm most interested in open data in government and criminal justice reform.
Colleen, do you want to go? You're muted right now, so yeah. If you unmute, we should be able to hear you.
You can unmute in the bottom.
Okay, great.
Oh, there you go.
I found this wonderful group through Yelka, wonderful Yelka. I had the privilege and honor of meeting Ryan, and we've had a few conversations, and really good to see you, Ryan. And very excited tonight to hear from the Chief Digital Officer of the state of Georgia. Very excited. Thank you.
Gilberto, do you want to introduce yourself? All right, maybe we'll come back to them. Oh,
Gilberto is in chat. Yep.
I'll read your chat. Hi, my name is Gilberto. I currently work at an email marketing company, Site Impact. I'm a web developer. And how did you find out about us? Rails developer. Very cool. Through WinCode. Oh, awesome.
It's a local coding boot camp.
Yeah, definitely. And we met at some of the same places in Fat Village. So very cool stuff there. Nice to see the tech community kind of coming full circle. Larry, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Ryan. My name is Larry Kagan. I am a freelance full stack engineer. I went freelance about 5 years ago, and I've had my head pretty much in the code ever since. And I finally have a moment to take a breath now. So I would like to interact with humans, and specifically maybe techie humans. That would be great. So this meetup was suggested. It was one of the suggested meetups at the bottom. I'm not a member. I wasn't a member of this group at the time. So it just suggested it. I'm like, well, that was cool. So I joined, and here I am. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for joining us. Livio, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect. So I'm Livio. I hail from Miami. I'm program manager of the Code for South Florida Miami program. We're basically, the sister organization here for Code for Fort Lauderdale over in Miami. And I'm very excited to hear about building better digital governments for, the future. That's very much at the core of our mission. So stoked.
All right, awesome. Michelle, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Michelle. I'm based in Miami, and I'm a product designer and a psychologist with a small private practice here in Miami, and also I see clients in New York. And pretty much I've kind of just evolved my career to include both, essentially. So I'm interested in, obviously, humans and their best interest and their needs. My friend Gregory Johnson and Whitney Lubin, they posted about this on LinkedIn. So I just thought I would jump in and find out more. So thank you for having me.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for joining.
Yeah,
Nikhil? Oh, sorry.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Nikhil Deshpande in Atlanta, so a little far away from y'all. This was pretty awesome. Rob looped me in. I'm really excited to talk to y'all and answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you for coming. We're really honored and privileged to have you as our guest speaker. I think it's awesome, and it's really cool to see things, great things happening, not just in our neck of the woods, but also in Atlanta too, and across Georgia. So thank you again.
Pleasure.
Roman, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Good evening. My name is Roman Mukaseyev. I'm a full-time student in Florida International University. I found out about this group from the meetup, as well as from Livio. He's kind of helping with for the code of Miami, to improve the things out there. I'm here to meet new people and have a good time. Yes.
Awesome. I think you came to the right place. Wilson, do you want to introduce yourself? You're still on
Hey,
mute.
folks.
Sorry
about that. Hey, I'm Wilson. Learned about y'all through Facebook Meetup. I've been kind of lurking for a while. I grew up in South Florida, but I've been living in San Francisco for the last 15 years. Just moved back. So having been lurking, I was pretty ready to jump on and meet folks. I've worked with other CFA brigades on a number of other projects. It's always super awesome to meet the community, meet cool folks, see awesome work. I'm desperate for community in South Florida, having been away for so long and kind of experiencing culture shock. It's really different from San Francisco, which has very fleshed out digital government systems and processes and interaction with people. I work in the nonprofit industrial complex. I work for an abortion access nonprofit doing IT security and digital security for organizations like abortion funds. That's my day job. Personal work is pretty much the same. I work with an abortion fund, a new abortion fund in Florida that I might pitch to folks as a possibility for folks to contribute to. I'm also just excited to see what other folks are working on. Happy to meet everybody.
Thanks for joining, Wilson. So glad to hear that you had some experience with some of the other brigades in the other cities, since there's so many different groups that are popping up. So it's good to hear that you had some experience there. Excited to debrief about your challenges and experiences.
Yeah, totally. This seems very well organized, so I'm very excited to see what comes out of this. It's always a spectrum, right, of less or more organized, decentralized, et cetera, et cetera. This is great. I'm very grateful for the organizers. This looks fantastic.
Oh, thanks. Glad to hear that. Clement, I apologize if I mispronounced that. But would you like to introduce yourself?
You said it right.
Oh, cool. If you want to tell us what you're interested in, how you found out about us, and kind of your role and what you're doing professionally?
Well, right now I'm just a computer science student studying at FIU. Yeah.
A lot of Panthers.
Yeah. I don't know what to say. Sorry.
That's cool. We appreciate you joining and being open to learning something new about digital services. And yeah, cool.
I'm just here to learn. Yeah. That's. And I found this. It got recommended to me from on Meetup. Yeah. So, and I read about it, and I was interested in seeing what it was about. So.
Awesome. So thank you everybody for introducing and sharing. Really appreciate that. We're going to go through real quick and explain what Code for America is and Code for Fort Lauderdale. And then we're going to get to the main section of tonight's meeting, which is our conversation with Georgia Chief Digital Officer and Digital Services Team Lead, Nikhil Deshpande. I hope I said that right. Forgive me if I didn't. So just like we're meeting here today, we're meeting virtually, and there's what are called brigades all across the country, and even some international that are meeting here to come together and work on problems that we see within our community or within government, and try to work together to solve some of those problems, or at least take a few steps in the right direction. And we think that technology and open data have a big role to play in that, and there's some untapped possibilities there. So at a high level, here's some of the things that we do. We lead and organize civic-minded technologists where you live around brigade activities and campaigns and projects. We open civic data, so we build digital libraries and help publish and curate, working with various basically the entities, whether they be city, county, state, that are collecting that data. We can be advocates for how they release it, what format, what kind of availability it is, some of the nitty-gritty details. We also deploy civic apps. We build things and for users and citizens and people in government, so that they can either solve their problems or do their job more effectively. We also advocate for open government. That's a big thing. Recently, for the last election in Fort Lauderdale, we had an open data survey where we were just asking candidates, what were their positions on open data? What did they know about open data? Just to keep that in the conversation. Because open government is obviously a very big topic. And I think open data is a part of that, but a relatively newer and sometimes overlooked. Another really awesome thing is everything that we do is open source. So you can contribute to it, you can build your portfolio, you can learn something new, and you can share what you've done. There's this video here. Last time it didn't play, so I'm not even going to try this time. But if you're interested, this is a little bit more polished kind of promo of Code for America about what the brigades are all about. So there's that.
And for folks, just to remind folks for the slides, this is on our Meetup page. So where you registered, there's an agenda link now to follow through the slides, so you can all follow back on these links on your own time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Rob. So now let's go to our conversation with Nikhil. And I am actually going to switch so we can see everybody. Okay. So we're going to kick it off. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get started on your journey, and what led you to government tech?
Sure. Hey, everyone. It's been a while that I'm in government tech, and it's refreshing to see the democratization of apps and all the service delivery that started from about 15 years ago, and slowly how the groundswell just has happened. And my
my journey started overall, I want to say, from advertising. My career started in advertising. I went to ad school. And then after a few years, with a few burnouts, I wanted to go back to grad school. And interaction design was really picking up back then, and it was really interesting because I enjoyed the part I enjoyed in advertising was working with people, and one of the things that I used to do was test our campaigns on folks. So I really liked how that informed what ideas worked and where people were more gravitated towards, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. So I went back to school to do my master's in interaction design, and right then I was heavily convinced that I'm really want to be focusing my efforts into something that is impactful, something that is beyond just like adding some companies' revenues. So when I found this opportunity with the state, it did not come as this job or this role, but I was hired to lead the web services for the state of Georgia. I had a pretty small team. We had a list of different websites, static websites. Everyone was doing their own thing. And the idea was that we would just, as a team, work with every agency and help them update their content and design their websites. But very quickly, we realized that that's just not how things are going to work out for everyone. Like, we really need to look at it as one state, pull everyone together, have a cohesive web presence. So about 10 years ago, we launched our first multi-tenant platform for all websites, and we brought about 45 agencies together, and we explained to them the idea of primarily any Georgian, or this is true for any constituent, regardless of the state that you live in, right? Like, you either come looking for information, or you come looking for services, or you come looking for information about services. But the intent is to either get informed or transact. When we did a survey about 6 years ago, we saw that about 70% of the people, their primary intent was to get informed. And then 30% came in with the primary goal of transacting. So maybe the transaction session could have had some information sessions as the precursor, but only when people were well informed to transact were they coming back and transacting with us. That really put a lot of importance on that information layer and how important it is. And if the last few weeks have taught us anything, it is that our information layer really needs to be on its top to be delivering the kind of information that people are looking for, regardless of where they're coming from, regardless of the devices they're looking for, using us. So it was very important for us to. Are you able to hear me? Okay, my video just froze. I'm on my own screen.
Yeah, I'd say so far so good.
Okay.
Some
okay,
slight breakups, but yeah, overall very good.
Okay. All right. Cool. So yeah, I mean, the focus really, kind of started with us being the team that not only just talked about any agency's web issues, but we started talking about their overall issues. Back even before people really knew the concept of a customer journey, we were mapping like how people transacted with, say, Department of Revenue or any other agency. Like, how do they even like get informed? In many cases, we learned that they get like a physical letter in mail, and then there is a web address printed on that, and people go actually type in and then end up going to that particular application. And we started mapping everything from a channel perspective. And then slowly, about 5 years into this, when gov.uk was created and USDS was created, I was already looking at the trends and how things were progressing across the world and in here as well. And Jen Jen Pahlka, she wrote this amazing piece about like the advent of digital services and how the concept is catching on. And I think that was really kind of like the catalyst for, I'm like, this is a really good blueprint of this idea. And I decided that I'm going to pitch this within the state, that we need a centralized team that doesn't really work like a SWAT team, as a reactionary team to go and fix something when something's on fire. But we need someone who can actually work with agencies and create a sustainable blueprint of like how service delivery really needs to be when things are not going crazy, when things are are stable, but also when things blow up, then what, right? Like at this point, one of the testament for our environments that we built is just like any other state, our traffics are through the roof. And it was really painful for me to read some other states where they were struggling with just like keeping their applications, web properties open. As a constituent, it's a really bad feeling when you're out of a job and you're just like trying to file your claim for unemployment, and what you get is a page not found. So I'm really happy that like some of the work that we have done, even though our traffic surges are insane, we were able to not only just be available, but we also were effective in making sure that we are just accommodating the traffic that's coming in. Our overall overall web traffic has been now like almost like 1,500% more than typically what we see. And in some cases, for like specific websites like public health or labor, it is like 10,000% more in like the highest of the spikes that we have seen. So but then also the information layer, all of that needs to come together. Like the journey should be accounted for. And so about like 4 years ago, the Office of Digital Services was created. And I was really honored to be given the chance to lead it, to to conceptualize it, and then based on what I presented after a series of I guess back and forth and just getting more clarity on like where does this sit, where does this office function out of, and then what are going to be our charter missions. So I think that is something that really helped in getting the definition for what we are working on today.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, really, I think, I can absolutely see some challenges right now, but I think it's also an opportunity, particularly for some of the work that you've done, to really shine. I'm sure every department that took the time to improve their portions of the website and update their content and, make it more, one of the terms that we use is goal-oriented, where people are coming there to achieve something and try to design the page to facilitate that. I think that's really important, as opposed to just a pure kind of design mindset of, visually appealing.
Right.
So
yeah, no, that was like the biggest change that we actually implemented, was every digital property was a mirror image of the organization. And the structure was very traditional, as far as like how an organization is structured within the organization. That's how a website was structured. We turned that around and we made it more where like the service is at the core of your website, and then everything else builds on that. So a very data-centered approach.
Oh, that's great. Let's see. You touched on it a little bit, but can you tell us what a chief digital officer does, and then what your average day is like.
Oh, I so I have spoken with about 15 or 20 other chief digital officers across other states or cities, and it almost seems like each of us really does different things from a things to do perspective. But I guess if we can find a common thread, is essentially it just boils down to our primary goal is to make our constituents' interactions meaningful with our digital properties. That is purely our North Star. And when I say meaningful, I mean that in a situation like this today, if someone loses their job, right, like they really should not have to get frustrated trying to understand what are the next steps. That information should be easily available to them. The services should be easily available to them. They should be available. They should be intuitive. They should be usable. And then after they interact, the follow-up should accordingly, be done. So the overall end-to-end journey needs to be something that people can feel confident. We as government, we can't really aspire to bring delight into our experiences. I mean, it would be great if someone finds our interaction delightful, but we're not Netflix or we're not Amazon. We're like, people, when they have to interact with us, it is only because there is a reason why, and in most cases, it's not an enjoyable reason on their end. So at least at the state level, I wanna say that if we can prove that we are efficient and effective, we end up building confidence in that interaction, and as I want to say outcome of that, we end up building trust. And I think that is truly the currency. When I talk to agencies, I talk about different business models. I talk about what the private sector is doing, and immediately the conversation gets to like, well, but actually they have the dollar to chase. Here we are not here to make money. So then what is the motivation, right? So, but when you kind of put as, well, trust is your currency. The more trust that you win, the more confidence that you win of your constituents, it is only going to be beneficial, because at this point, when our traffic looks like we are 2,000, 5,000% more in the overall demand, there is no way we can staff and we can scale. So we have to rely on digital channels to be able to sustain that traffic. And if people are not convinced that this is the right site or the right application, they are going to call, right? So just building that trust online at that digital level is critical, not just from the right thing to do perspective, but also from a business sense perspective.
That's great. Thank you for that. Yeah, a lot of things definitely resonated. I know we focus all the time on really short and positive feedback loops with our users. Love that, and I love what you said about meaningful interactions, and who government serves, because it's an important distinction. And I think I also liked how you stayed very grounded in the fact of kind of where you sit in people's lives. Because like you said, it's not entertainment, it's not Netflix. I do have a question though, because we are getting some great questions through the chat. Do you have a preference of wanting to address those kind of as they come up, or should we wait until the end?
I'm okay either ways. However y'all want to structure this.
Yeah, some of those questions will be answered in our questions. So I think we just run through ours, and then any spillovers we could address.
Okay.
But I think the next one ties into Greg's question perfectly.
Okay, yeah, but for everyone on the call, we'll have a spot of time where anyone can ask questions. What is the Georgia Digital Services origin story? How was this instituted? State statute, government declaration?
I want to say in 2017 was when we officially announced digital services. It was an office created by the state CIO, and it essentially was offered as services that other agencies could engage in. And Georgia works just like most other states now, where we charge for our services to other agencies. The goal is not to make profit, but the goal is to obviously, kind of be in the black. You can't be in the red, but the benefit of that is that you have the same team who works with multiple agencies. So as we work on more and more projects, there is this knowledge base that builds that we can leverage towards the next project. So in 2017, when we offered this, the origin story of this is really where I was leading the web team. I already was working with about 50 agencies on their websites. I already had a good level of understanding on what their issues were. Me and my team, we almost work with them, on a weekly basis on some of the other projects. So when they learned that this is an offering, this is a new team, it wasn't like completely new to them, but the charter was new to us because then suddenly that opened up the landscape for like what we could do. We were not just confined to the web piece of it. We really could tackle the entire journey. One thing to consider here is different states have different ways of doing things, right? So with Georgia, we have state agencies who are assigned their own budgets. So they're pretty much in charge of their own budgets, and their commissioners, their agency CIOs can decide how they want to essentially spend that budget. So similarly, applications and services sit within those agencies. It took a long time for us to centralize the web technology, where content is still owned by agencies, but the technology, the centralized web cloud-hosted content management system now is pretty much within one agency, and everyone else is more like a multi-tenant model. From a service perspective, it's a little complicated because services come in different shape and sizes, and a lot of them could be built on legacy code. I guess we just about last year or so ended up sunsetting our last mainframe. So, there are like certain services that kind of have a different challenge that comes with them. So I think for the time being, we decided that we are going to be solely focusing on the experience layer. So we almost started working with agencies to kind of create that abstraction layer where, regardless of what happens beneath from a code perspective, from an end user constituent experience perspective, we can deal with what they see and how they interact with us. So typically where you see where a website is really nicely designed, and then the moment you click on the link to the application, you feel like you're transported 20 years back, because literally that's when the application was created. We have started tackling that layer now, piece by piece, but it took us a long time just to create that culture of one Georgia, if you understand what I mean, right? Because and I've seen this in other states as well. I'm part of the National Association for State CIOs, and I get the opportunity to talk to other state CIOs and my counterparts, because in some states, digital services falls under the CIO function. In some states, it falls under revenue function or the budget office, depending on how you are placed. But it doesn't change that a lot of times agencies can feel territorial about, this is my budget, this is my website, this is my application. But creating that culture is really important. And I mean, now it feels like a cliche, but like back in the day when I first read it, I just had this aha moment of just like, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So unless we change that, nothing's going to change. But you can't change culture overnight. So it took us a long time to just get to where we are, where now we have 80 websites on this one singular platform that is driven by a single design system. It is all hosted on a single code base. And granted, every agency manages their own content, but from an end user perspective, that experience has become seamless. Earlier, it was a gallery of sorts for like every website having their own colors, their own way of presenting things. It was impossible to go from one side to the other. And the way services have started blending in, we see our Department of Revenue work with Department of Driver Services. But if they both have different presences, then how do you combine them? So that was the challenge, truly, from a digital services perspective, is always be representing your end user, always be representing your constituent. And you have business at the table, you have technology at the table. You need to have the user at the table, and you can't in most cases, and that's where we come in.
That's absolutely huge to hear. And I know for at first glance it seems like having it under one system is just a technical consideration. But when you look at that consistency in terms of user experience, it plays right into what you were talking about before about building trust with your users, about they don't click a link and say, oh, did I go to some other website? Am I still on Georgia? Am I still where I should be?
Yeah. And then you have malicious websites as well, right? So it's not just that agencies have a variation. Then you have people with malicious intent who pose as government websites and capture citizen data, promise them services, and obviously don't deliver, but they run away with your PII. Most of them are not even physically located here, so you can't go after them. So the best you can do is you can ramp up your presence in a way that it's predictable, it is believable. And that's one of the reasons, one of the very first standard that I remember working on was the domain standard. And we had agencies with domain names from like .coms to orgs to nets to whatever, but it took us a while to convince everyone, like, yes, I know you have a lot of marketing material printed, but you need to be a .gov. So yeah, that's a long tail to kind of get to the point where everyone now realizes and agrees.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge lift, but so important and so impactful when you get it right. How do you build things? Is there a preferred tech stack? And what methods of building / standards are you used? Do you follow USDS design specs to any extent?
So I can probably group how we build things in two large buckets. One is we build web technologies as far as just like the websites, and then we have applications. When we look at the applications, it is really, like I said, because it originates from every agency. It really depends on who is leading it within the agency, what is their preference of technology. So I mean, literally, you name it and we have it. But from a consolidation perspective, when we started consolidating web technology, my preference was open source. And it took us a while. And again, mind you, these conversations were almost 11 years ago. So people just thought open source was just like, wait a minute, isn't that free thing, that people just like dabble over the weekends? Like it just like blew people's mind, the fact that like I'm proposing this as a state platform. And it took a while, but we ended up moving from like an proprietary enterprise content management system that we were really pouring a lot of money into. And I mean, the first thing when I took this job, I looked at the numbers, I looked at the impact of what that tool was doing, and I was like, it's a no-brainer. We need to move. We need to just cut our costs, But there was a lot of this sunk cost fallacy, aspect of it. Like, wait a minute, but we have invested millions in that. We can't run away from it. I'm like, oh no, you can. And I mean, the millions that you're going to save going forward is really like the value of what open source is going to bring. But open source was not just because like I was advocating free or less expensive solution. Open source, I truly believe that at the information layer, what open source allowed us to do was truly work in the open. And that was a big thing for me, was if we are doing something, I should be able to share it. And when honestly, I was looking for an open source solution, I was knocking almost every state's door to ask what they were using. And I saw this mindset in the states that they were using open source. They were very willing to share their lessons learned, their successes or their challenges. And I loved it. I loved it. And I'm like, this really aligns with what I like as well. So not only we just moved to an open source technology, but we also really moved to an working in the open mindset. So we started contributing back to the community. We ended up using Drupal to build our content management platform, but we also really got involved in the community. And we primarily work with development partners, but we also very precisely selected the partners that were known to contribute back and make impactful contributions in the community. Because anyone can claim that they do Drupal and they can show all kinds of projects. But when we were selecting vendors as part of our procurement, we required them that majority of their revenue needs to come from Drupal projects. And we asked to see a list of their contributions back to the Drupal community. And we based our weights of their bids on that. I mean, those were like the key, I would say, mandatory, but pretty one of the key decision factors in who we decided to go with. But going back to the whole idea of like open source, that is our preferred tool stack for the web layer. And we have slowly started moving other state agency websites from other technology stacks into the Drupal stack that we have built. So we basically took Drupal 8 in the most recent project that we did, and then we customized it to the point where it almost can be called a distro. And future, I would say like my wish would be that I can like literally package it and just offer it to other states to use it, because we did a lot of research with our constituents, with our agencies, and then we came up with like very specific content types. We came up with, I mean, already it comes with APIs. So, we truly made it where we can connect websites and share content across websites or bubble up content to Georgia.gov. So it really kind of, drives that whole single source of truth idea of you don't have to create multiples of everything and then, just kind of create more confusion. Right now, we are really seeing the benefits of that because obviously our call centers just, are on fire with all the calls coming in. They really can't sustain that traffic. So we had to put in a chatbot in place. And we could just connect that bot to our existing content on websites. And, we can have like different pools of like domain specific content for like labor, for public health. But, what we do is it also serves off the website. So the content is not duplicated. Thankfully, we didn't have to architect it right now when we needed it. We architected it back then. So we were just able to put a bot on top of it and have it function effectively like otherwise we would have expected it to do. So that's just a little kind of detour long answer to your questions of what technology stacks we use.
No, that's great. Thank you. I really, I've got to say, this is the first time that I've ever heard of open source contributions being brought as a measurement into the procurement process. And I love that. Like, I think
I don't think anyone has done that.
That's huge. Yeah.
At least I don't know of. But ever since we have done it, I have kind of like offered that idea to many other states and other local governments who are like, don't just kind of like get awed by the dog and pony shows of like what some of the people can show that they can do for you. Because what we have seen is some of the larger organizations, larger companies, I'm not going to name anybody, they easily just went and gobbled up a few smaller businesses that do Drupal, and then they suddenly started claiming we have done Drupal and these are our projects. But thankfully, everything's open and there is a lot of transparency. You can see who has not only done that project, but which Drupal developer has worked on that project. And we were able to see and tell where like, some of these bids were just not true in the way they were presenting themselves. And with this filter, we were able to do it in a very fair way that we had disclosed our criteria ahead of time. Because, again, I don't want to get too much into procurement speak, but that also like one of the hats I wear is I need to be quite aware of how procurements work, because you have just one protest that needs to happen and it just sends off your timeline into limbo forever. So we had to be very careful about like how we set those expectations and then truly kind of grade as per what we have set as our quadrant for how we were grading. And I was glad that of course I did not have any preference on who I wanted to pick to begin with, but I was very happy to see that the community truly pays attention to your work. And I mean, I don't know if you have any state people here or any government people here, but one thing I really would like to say is people pay attention. If you're doing good work, people pay attention. And I was surprised and I was like humbled by like how much people wanted to bid on our projects, just for the fact that we were opening up our bids for the chance to work with us. So I was very grateful for that.
That's really awesome. Let's see. Yeah, I know time's going quick. Let's see. How well do you think Georgia's digital position is? And if you were to rank it like from 1 to 10, and why would you give it that ranking?
So there are bodies who actually rank states. There are non-government bodies who look at every state's digital presence. Every year we have to fill out multiple surveys, disclose our workings, our plans, or achievements, and we get ranked. And we have only been climbing up in those rankings. If I remember our last ranking that happened, I want to say Georgia either got like a B+ or an A-, as compared to other states. And I want to say only about 4 or 5 states got into the A's. There was a pretty long list of B's, long list of C's. I want to say a longer list of C's, and there were some D's. But I don't think that matters, to be honest, because our competition is not other states. I really see our competition as Amazon, our competition as Apple. And not that we're competing with their products, but we are competing with people's expectations. because one thing we have in common with our constituents is that they are also the Amazon customers. They're also Apple customers. And they are used to a certain level of experience. And when they don't get that from their government, that sense of disappointment sets in real fast, and there's no reason for it. Because at this point, we live in a society, we live in a setup where individuals like yourselves are eager to work with governments. And I think governments should reach out and collaborate and create more opportunities where we can work together. I have been lucky enough to have exposure on like other projects using other technologies, but there are a lot of government folks who stay within the government silo, and their exposure kind of then limits to only the demos they get from companies who are quite aggressive in their sales. Again, not going to name any, but I have not seen a single salesperson that represents an open source company, right? So it is up to us to really keep learning about what are the changing technologies out there. And the more we do that, the more I guess we are able to create a better presence where a constituent be like, well, this is at least mappable to like what my experience with a certain private sector company has been. So I've never really thought of any other state. I always like to see what are some of the lessons that other states have learned. But I really kind of like see where like if we ever compete, we compete with the expectations that people have from what they have their expectations set by the Apples and the Amazons of the world.
That's a really great point. Let's see. What are the biggest challenges that you see for Georgia's digital future, and how will transitions be handled?
Challenges are, from a scale of like, there are always going to be the subtle changes that keep happening, and you always have to keep yourself lean enough and agile enough to keep adapting. But truly the challenge, the more I guess I'm getting into like a better maturity model of digital services, the larger challenge that I see is I'm finding very hard to find good people to come and work for the state. And I think I really would encourage people to have the same mindset as they would to, go work with say USDS or, at the federal level, like also engage with your cities and also engage with your states. And granted, it also needs like, the states and the cities need to kind of offer that platform where we can create an engagement opportunity. But again, brigades, right? Like you mentioned, like, man, that's a great opportunity to have. And we have obviously a code for Atlanta, and it's amazing. And it has some great people working, and I have been involved with Code for America for a while now. I was actually one of the content chairs this year for the summit. I was so unfortunate that, I can't even, like, don't even get me started on that. There was a lot of work that went into putting together, and it was just, it's very painful to see a nonprofit that has to adapt to, something like this, as opposed to like when everyone's like, oh yeah, all the conferences are canceling, blah, blah, blah. But they are private companies, but it's a big deal for a nonprofit to have to go through this change. But those people are like the folks at Code for America are amazing, and I know that they will rise. And we will do everything within our capacity to be supportive, and again go work with them to figure out a better future for us. But that would be my another suggestion to like anybody who is here from a government perspective, is just figure out opportunities where you can engage with brigades, you can engage with the your chapter for Code for America. So one of the things that we have done is we have created a digital center of excellence within Georgia. And because I am part of Georgia Technology Authority, one of the things we can do is we are also required to set the state standards and policies and guidelines. All of the digital standards have been a result of the collaboration between state agencies, private sector, and organizations like Code for Atlanta. So I don't know. I see one Code for America hoodie here, but I don't know if anyone knows Luigi, who is so instrumental in Code for Atlanta. I mean, he has been an amazing support for us, and I cannot thank him enough for his collaboration contribution in the things that we have worked together. But like, those are the key pieces where we can involve them, and then that informs us in what we should be doing, what we should be setting as best practices and setting as standards for us.
So that's great. I personally don't know Luigi, but definitely gonna have to look him up now. We do have a Slack that we can all chit chat on, so I'll take that as a note for myself to follow up with him. What are you and your team currently working on, and what is GovHub?
Me and my team are currently working on keeping the lights on, and making sure everyone kind of is able to register for unemployment or get their COVID tests done. Well, one of the things that we are working on right now is we just rolled out a performance measurement tool. GovHub is our state's content management platform. It's a digital publishing platform. And what I was explaining earlier, the idea of centralizing everything. GovHub is that. It is driven by a design system, which is pretty heavily influenced by the US design system, to answer your earlier question. So we don't really, at this point, truly directly connect with the US design system, but at this point, if I go back 2 years ago and we were planning on redoing what we are doing, that's probably something I may have done at this point. But we thought that like maybe we could come up with our own design system, which I'm really happy we did. But those are all the key assets that we have created in the last 2 or 3 years. And now we are implementing a performance measurement tool. So now our agencies not only have website as a channel of information delivery, but they get to set their goals. They get to set their own OKRs or their KPIs. And then we also give them that tool to measure it. We give them, all the needed understanding of like how goals need to be set for digital properties. And then, what are some of the aspects of the things that you should be looking for. So truly measuring how successful they are, and then strategizing with them and what their roadmap needs to look like is really going to be like the focus for us. But also we are reacting a lot to the changes that are happening around us. So at this point, if our traffic levels are through the roof, we are coming up with newer channels to make sure that we can answer those questions without someone having to just standing holding on the call for a long time. So that's where like the chatbots are coming up. That's where possibly the text bots will come up. So people are truly leading us at this point in the way they are interacting with us, because in a regular state, we do research and obviously we feel like we are a little ahead of what people are already doing. So we can be ready to serve when the mobile traffic goes up to a certain point. To give you an example, in 2012, when responsive design was relatively very new, Georgia Gov already was responsive. We were actually one of the very first states to go responsive because back then our mobile traffic was like a little over 20%. Typically the mobile moment, as you call it, is when your traffic tips over 50%. But today our mobile traffic is like almost close to 70%. But if we had not laid that groundwork back then, today would have been really hard. And I know there are a lot of government sites, even today, this day, they're not mobile friendly. And that is just I mean, at this point, it should really be considered a crime, a digital crime, but still. So yeah, I mean, we are mapping in how expectations and behavior patterns change in a state of crisis. And we are going to be designing for this. We're going to be building for this. Hopefully, we shouldn't be in this situation again. But if we are, I think we'll be better prepared than we are today.
For those looking to get involved in digital services, what skill sets do you think they should focus on?
I think every skill set has a place within digital services. Just do what you enjoy doing. And I think that the only skill that I really look for is how passionate you are to serve and how passionate you are to make, an impact. Really, I mean, and that's something that I've seen where like people walk in with a very different skill set, but when they stay on the team, they pick so many other skills. But I guess if their focus is on service delivery, their focus is on making products better. I think that is like the key. But at this point, I mean, really, depending on whichever digital services team you find your place in, it really doesn't matter like what your skills are. And I mean, technical skills are always helpful, in regardless of whatever. Like I said, we have almost like you name the technology and like we have something running somewhere in one of our servers, that uses that technology. But I guess where I really value my core team is truly built of product people and content people. Those are like, the two key aspects of like where my core team is built on. And of course, we have customer service, we have engineering, we have training and education and everything. But like we have product mindset, we have content mindset. And I think, when we start looking at the services that we provide, yes, those are services, but the channels and the way we provide the services are indeed products. And let's truly start looking at them and managing them like products, like the private sector does. We have started really seeing a lot of benefit in a better service delivery.
Oh, that's great. Let's see. Moving on to one last non-tech question before opening it up to the group. What has been the best advice you've received in life so far?
I mean, there have been so many. It's hard to. But one thing, it always comes back to me every year, and maybe the first thing I'm thinking of it right now is because I'm going through it again, is budgets. I handle a pretty large budget, obviously, because of all the things that we have to manage. When I was given my own budget back in the day, I remember my then budget director, really talking about like how these are public funds, and we really need to be good stewards of public funds. And everyone reads about government spend and government waste, and like there is literally term called government Christmas, which comes right around the end of the budget cycles, where people are like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose this money. Let me just spend on something else, right? Like, I've never put myself in a position where I have to do that. I prioritize my budget based on what my other priorities are. I always make sure that my budget is spent on inclusive technologies. There's accessibility is a big part of what I advocate. So anything that we build, accessibility has to be baked in. And again, that's like one of the things that we have actually built within our procurement as well, is any vendor that we work with, they have to actually show and then be audited for the accessibility levels of what they deliver to us. So I make sure that obviously they don't go and audit their own code. I get to audit. So for that, I need budget. So, literally the whole idea of like putting your money where your mouth is the best piece of advice. Is really, if these are the things that are important to you, budget for them. Otherwise, they're not going to happen.
That is absolutely good advice. Let's go to some of the group questions. Huberto had asked, how's Georgia Digital Services dealing with the infrastructure side of things? Are they self-hosted or using cloud providers? And what open source technology are they using?
So we have a mix of self-hosted and cloud services. So all of our web environment is cloud-hosted. We host on AWS, and then we have contracted sysadmin companies that work with us, very specific flow Drupal hosting. But we have our own data center, and all the transactional applications, all the technology stacks are hosted within our data center.
Okay, let's see. And then Colleen, I think she left, but she did have a question. Said, fascinating info. May I inquire about plans for contact tracing? To what degree Georgia has figured that out? Also, the cross-sector agency involvement during the pandemic in Florida has left some open questions about who owns, who is responsible, what entity is accountable for tracking testing data. In Florida, the responsible agency appears to be Florida Department of Health. Curious how Georgia is working with the state Department of Health and drilling down to provide local data locally.
I may be able to just partially answer based on just my knowledge of this. Just yesterday, our governor had a press conference along with our commissioner for the Department of Public Health, Dr. Toomey, and they did a joint press conference and talked a lot about contact tracing, and we are investing and putting tools in to enable that. We just ramped up our testing efforts. We are already offering online registrations for testing. So you put in your symptoms, and based on what your input is, it automatically registers you for like a testing location, and it gives you probably like a QR code that you take. So there is like a trail for like then what your result is. But that's happening right now. I don't know if the contact tracing technology and the tool set is already implemented. I know they already started looking at some thermal equipment as well to just kind of, monitor some folks who will be visiting state offices. So I think there's a lot that has been happening. But one thing that I have seen is every agency is working very closely with other agencies and the governor's office. We are working very closely with public health. We just rolled out dashboards for them not too long ago, where they are way intuitive and much easier for folks to understand. They also, offered like a easy downloadable database that other organizations can just easily, kind of take that database and, compile it with their own sets.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I know. Just on a personal level, I've been watching the Florida Department of Health chart for the new cases, and all the emotional ups and downs of watching that go good and bad.
Yeah.
But so yeah, that's definitely useful. Let's see. And then Michelle had one more question. What is your RFP process for vendors? How do you work with vendors? And Rob added, how can we start to make this culture change in Florida, RE procurement? Any suggestions?
All right, so I can take with how do we work with the RFP. So we have a centralized administrative services department that handles all the state procurements, And then most of the authorities have an extension of the procurement teams that work within the department. We are pretty flexible when it comes to, I want to say, how we want to have a procurement, as long as obviously the procurement is transparent, as long as it's clear, and you can either choose to have a multi-procurement where, like what we did recently is we didn't just go with like a monolith approach that most government does. You pick one winner and then like everything relies on that, and then that person becomes the prime, and then they can bring their own subs. When we did our procurements, we already knew exactly what we were trying to build, what are the components of it. So we created different lines of our procurement. It was more like the BPA procurement, like a blanket purchasing agreement. Within every lane, for example, we created, development, we created content, we created design, for example, we created accessibility, we created UX. We can have multiple vendors qualified. So it is more like an RFQC process. And then once the project kicks in, we can engage, we can cross-pollinate, we can then have those folks who really kind of have a certain skill set, which is their benefit, their strength. They can truly be effective into the project. So there are different ways to conduct procurement, and I mean, Georgia has really a great team when it comes to the procurement team. They understood what I was trying to do, and then accordingly came up with some suggestions, some ideas. And I mean, it was a little longer process than I would have liked to, but end of the day, I feel like that helped us a lot. Just going through the initial qualification rounds, so then we down select to like our qualified vendors, and then we are open to work with them.
That's great. So it is 8:18. Want to see if anybody has any more final questions for Nikhil, and then probably try to wrap up at 8:30ish. I appreciate everybody that's been able to hang in there. I know it's a long time to be on a call, but really appreciate this great information, Nikhil.
Happy to.
Did anyone else have any other questions?
I wanted to ask about
go ahead.
Something that was like kind of implicit in the way you talked about like pitching the digital services org. I wanted to ask about buy-in and how getting buy-in for like funding for some of your projects or staffing, or even like the processes you build around vendor vetting, stuff like this has been different from like getting buy-in when you're working in an industry setting. I'm new, for example, like I'm new in the nonprofit world, and I'm finding that like getting buy-in for funding, buy-in from contributors is totally different. It's like the slow political process, and you're like a couple of degrees closer to politicians. I imagine it's much more political. Wondering if you can talk on that a bit more directly.
It is really hard. I think it really depends and changes per organization, depending on where you are. But like what I have always seen is I just don't take no for an answer, and I just keep kind of like going back and addressing what I'm trying to do, what are the benefits that come out of this, and then someone somewhere sees the value in it. Like, so for just to give you an example of this change of open source option of our content management system, it was just like unheard of, and everyone were just like, to the point like literally a few people even like laughed, like good luck trying to get that done within the state, right? But I caught our chief financial officer at one point. I'm just like, look, this makes a lot of financial sense. And of course, trying to explain the value of open source as like, you can do a lot of things compared to, that you are restricted with proprietary software was not the right message. Like, he was purely looking at numbers, and I was trying to explain to him, like, look, we're already using something that is costing us in millions and we're not getting value out of it. Open source is not free, but I won't say it's cheap, but it gives you a lot of leverage to do things that will make you successful. And then I kind of like put some numbers together, right? So I basically spoke his language, and also back then, about 12 years ago, proposed that we go to the cloud instead of self-hosting. And that was like a big game changer in a way that, like, we ended up hosting with AWS, and I mean that just changed our numbers altogether. So I think uh, it's just a matter of understanding where people are coming from and why they may be saying no to you. But once you start looking beyond their nose in like the reasons and what could possibly change, you may be able to, maybe change one mind at a time. And then once you have that one person who will be your supporter, your advocate, then it's easier to change more minds. But just, yeah, start with like that one influencer that you can find that is willing to go bat for you when you're not there. I know this is not a straightforward answer to like, here's how you change minds, but it really depends on structure. The only thing I can say is just be patient and just do not take no for an answer.
Rob just suggested creating a list of people who might be like able to be influenced. I can already think of a number of Florida Congress people who, just like for the sake of access, for the sake of usability, want better digital services.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned in the chat how big of a failure DEO has been these last several weeks, fulfilling people's claims. Hopefully that puts a light on exactly this.
Yeah.
It seems that like the group is already focused on it. It seems like this brigade is already focused on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
Greg,
you for
if you
that.
have a question, jump in.
Cool. Yeah. So my question is, this is Gregory, leading code for South Florida. So one of the things that we've been doing over the last couple of years is working in the city of Miami and the county, and now with Broward, to create like more of a regional nonprofit organization around this. And where we kind of see more of like an appetite is for like these agencies that just come in and kind of like work with these governments to get into that procurement process. And my question to you is, do you see like building your own like civic actions or 18F or USD kind of like as the model for like trying to like, once you get these relationships going and you have the team going, saying to these organizations, hey, we have talent for you, let us get in that bidding process? Or what's your take on it?
I would love that. I would really love to kind of build something like that within the state. I think with Digital Services Georgia, DSGA, we have created a USDS like model pretty much, where we are a team that we as a team can go and work with the different state agencies. But from a procurement perspective, what 18F has done, I think that's phenomenal. And in the past, I have connected like our procurement people with the federal procurement GSA folks. And 18F has a lot of these procurement web seminars that they do in agile procurement, right? Because like really like the key is to go agile. The key is to kind of change that monolithic norm that most of the government bodies are. But I am actually a big fan of the whole public service leave that certain companies offer, where if you're working with Google or Microsoft, like you can literally take like 2 years off and go work with USDS. You can go work with 18F. I think that is great. That is fantastic. And I think it should be other way around too. Government folks also should be able to be spared to go work in private sector, so that bring back a private sector experience. That is a larger shift in that culture, to what you are proposing. But there is no reason why it shouldn't be treated like, oh, that's never going to happen. Everything happens. But I would love to see folks like you all, where the brigades are, and where we as government officials who can, truly kind of make some of those decisions. I think what is more important is to kind of see that impact being made. And what has really helped us with like Code for Atlanta chapter is that I have participated in a lot of like hackathons in the past as a participant, as a judge. Go get your local representatives to, judge. Let them see what you guys are doing. That's the key, is the exposure, and what they see, what they know, then they are going to go and talk about what you all are doing. And that's really kind of the best way to get your word out. And unless you have a salesperson who is willing to compete with a Microsoft or some of the other largely known companies, that is the best way where you can actually show value. You can say like, we can do this. These are like your actual constituents. The last 2 or 3 years that I have been truly just talking about is, we all know, like, for the people, by the people, like I'm talking like with the people, let's do this with our folks. And the GovHub project that we did, we literally traveled around like 300-400 miles in Georgia. And when I spoke to people, across Savannah, across Macon, in the rural parts of Georgia, of course, in Atlanta, with like larger metro counties. But we got a sense of like what Georgia is and what everyone's expectations, what everyone's challenges is. We went to places where like I barely had like a bar on my cell phone. So the next time I design something, like I'm gonna remember that, before like loading a large image on my design or just like putting like a large file for a download. It only builds someone's exposure when they get involved at the local level. So I would totally recommend that, just to make it your goal to go and find like someone within your local government, someone within your state government to come and, judge, your events, or even like find like ways for them to participate. And hopefully that collaboration really then, compounds.
Very cool.
Well, I really want to wish you all well and all the best. And I can't wait to see some really awesome stuff come out of these chapters. And I'm lately a little occupied, but otherwise I'm pretty active on Twitter and LinkedIn. By all means, connect with me. I'll be more than happy to, share anything or answer anything if need be.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. I'm going to mute you real quick just because it's getting a lot of background noise. Thank you. But thank you, Nikhil. I cannot thank you enough for donating your time and coming to talk to us and sharing your experiences. I think it's such a valuable perspective. I think not only being within government, but having this forward-looking perspective, and not even just having that of what it could be, but also how do you bring everyone else around you on that journey and transforming hearts and minds. So really encouraging to see, really appreciate your time. Thank you for everyone that attended. I really love the questions. Thank you, Rob, for helping organize this. And also on the agenda to get onto our Slack. That's how we do most of our, sorry, we don't have a chance to go through that. But if you click this link, you can join our Slack. And our next meeting will be on Meetup. More than likely, it's going to be virtual, unless if that's not the case, we'll let everybody know. Rob also posted the link in the chat. This is going to be recorded, so we'll be sure to share that out as well. But I know it's been an hour and a half being on the call, so appreciate everybody hanging in there. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Nikhil. Great chatting with you. And for everyone, definitely check that last slide about active projects, things that are on our GitHub. Check out Code for Miami's GitHub repo. There's a lot of projects already out there. Don't reinvent the wheel. we're on Slack for another hour or so, half hour or so. I know Quinn's online until 9, so if you have any questions or anything, yeah, hit us up, chat us, let us know what you're working on. If you have anything that fits in the civic realm, or if you want to maybe show and tell at the next meetup. But yeah, just want to echo what Ryan said and thank everyone for making it out tonight.
All right, thank you.
Have a good one, y'all.
All right, bye. Stop recording.